Abrams, who was welcoming you, but we believe he just lost audio, so I'm going to jump right in. We're really excited about the conversation today. We know that we are in a moment of time. Many of us are talking about the need to be more intentional around supporting Black-led organizing and social change. And so ABSI and our partner Hill-Snowden Foundation, and specifically Nat Williams, are really excited about today's call and that so many of you can join us. So welcome. A couple of things. Everybody is in listen-only mode. This is being recorded. We just wanted logistics. You've got the agenda in front of you, and I'm just going to jump right in and share a little bit about how we want to spend our time. We just have about 90 minutes today. I am going to give you some background information about why we are, in fact, interested in this work right now in this moment of time and joining with Hill-Snowden to support the Black Social Change Funders Network. And then I'm going to turn it over to Nat Williams, who's really going to walk us through a lot of the early thinking, the ideas, the vision, and the background of and context for why we're pulling this network together. Ed Jones from ABSI, given that he has audio, will actually facilitate a question and answer period, and then I will close with some next steps and some summary comments. I should say at the end of the call, again, we have about 90 minutes, we want to have accomplished three things. One is that you all on the call have a good sense of the vision, the goals, and the starting ideas for the Black Social Change Funders Network. Two, that we collectively have a better understanding of how this network might support your work. That is a really important sort of part of the conversation today, is really to understand how we might shape this network to support the work that you're actually doing. And then three, that everyone on this call understands some basic next steps and what we hope to do moving forward. So that's a very quick overview of the agenda. And next slide, Nat, I'll talk a little bit about ABSI's interest in this work. And by nature of who we are, some of it should be self-explanatory. But first, it's important to know that we have a framework here at ABSI. We call it Responsive Philanthropy in Black Communities. And it really does frame all of the work that we do here at the organization. And it's guided by a set of principles and values and characteristics. And the first in the framework is community organizing. And so we developed this framework back in 2010, and this is the framework we're using to do trainings with foundation boards and staff around the country. So we've been talking about the need to invest in organizing in and for the Black community for quite some time here at ABSI. But also, we have been moved, like so many folks have in this country, around the incidents of police brutality, the killing of unarmed Black people, and in late 2014, we began a series of more intentional activities to lift up this issue of the importance of supporting Black-led organizing. Soon after Michael Brown's murder, we actually last fall co-sponsored a funder delegation to Ferguson. We were one of several partners to do so. The important thing to know is that this is an interest that is deep in the organization, not just on staff, but our board made a commitment this past October to be more visible and vocal on the importance of supporting Black-led organizing. And one of the outcomes of that was the start of a new blog that we call The Urgency of Now. Hopefully some of you have seen it. We added some of my blog posts actually to the pre-reading materials, and we will continue. The board says that it wants to be the drumbeat, the ongoing drumbeat on this issue about why it's important to invest in Black-led organizing and Black-led social change more broadly. We spotlighted this issue at our annual conference in Napa with a panel on supporting Black-led organizing. And what we're actually beginning to do just now is organize meetings around the country with our membership, Black professionals in philanthropy and Black organizing groups, just so that the relationships are there, and that we understand what these groups are doing, the capacity, their needs, and the like. So again, over the last year, we've been more intentional with a set of activities, and this being a new one. The other interest that we have in the Black Social Change Network is because we are bringing our experience with a similar network that's been focused on Black males. And over the last 3 years, we've organized the Black Men and Boys Learning and Action Network, where about 25 foundations with interest in Black male achievement have come together to learn, to strategize, and to coordinate investments. And so we've got a model that we can bring to the conversation about how to organize funders invested in Black-led social change. So this network, the launch of it, your interest, this conversation today could not be more timely for us here at AbbVie. So Nat is going to walk us through our thinking to date, the ideas and the vision behind the network. You all have read the materials. You're on this call because of your work and your interest. But it's important to say that we are looking for your guidance, your ideas and your thoughts, and we'll again have that Q&A conversation to get some of that today. But it's very early, and we're going to lean on all of us actually to make this network whole and right, and really move the field as it relates to Black-led organizing. So just a heads up, one of the things that we'll do at the end of this call is ask for a couple of volunteers, 2 to 3 of you on the phone that might be interested in working more closely with Hill-Snowden and AbbVie to basically design and shape some of the starting activities, really talk about next steps of this network and the like. So with that very quick and brief overview of our interest, we welcome you, and I'm going to turn it over to Nat, who's really going to take the lion's share of the job of walking you through what this is all about. Nat, I'll give it to you.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Susan, and I really appreciate AbbVie's partnership in this work, and welcome everybody to the call today, and thank you everybody for your participation today and your interest in the weeks and months leading up to this. I've had so many different conversations with so many different people that just really helped to push our thinking, but also to affirm, as Susan said earlier, the urgency of now and the rightness of this moment to engage in this work. So I just wanted to start talking a little bit about describing the contextual factors that serve as the impetus for the development of the Black Social Change Funders Network and our particular focus on strengthening the infrastructure for Black institutional and political power. So, to say the least, the Black Social Change Funders Network was inspired by the dynamic and courageous organizing of what has become to be known as the Black Lives Matter movement on anti-Black racism and the extrajudicial killings of Black people by the police. However, for me, the Black Lives Matter movement opened up a political space to expand the scope of a conversation that I've been having for several years about the dearth of support for Black-led organizing groups and other parts of the infrastructure for Black social change, and the consequent declining political significance and power of the Black community. The Black Lives Matter movement has generated a tremendous amount of social power in the past year and has forced the issue of anti-Black racism back into the center of American public discourse. But this work has been done in an environment of severely diminished institutional and political power of Black social change organizations. And we define institutional power as the structural capacity necessary to move forward an agenda for social change in a strategic and coordinated fashion over a sustained period of time. And we define political power as the ability to influence and change how systems operate, like policies and practices. And so, case in point, many of the leading organizations associated with the Black Lives Matter movement in the past year or so have been in existence for less than 3 years, and many are less than 18 months old. And they have to juggle both leading a movement and leading new organizations with limited staff capacity. So these reflect this kind of diminished institutional power that we have within the Black community. And other Black-led social and racial justice organizations may have been around longer than some of the groups that are leading the movement in the past year, but many are still severely under-resourced, and other groups that are maybe more established are having struggles to remain relevant in this new era. And so, from my perspective, the last time the Black community exercised a considerable amount of social, institutional, and political power was during the Civil Rights era. And I would trace at least a part of the Black community's currently constrained institutional and political power to the conservative backlash to the Civil Rights and Black Power movements that for the last 40 years has successfully engaged in a systematic strategy to nullify the gains of and also decrease the social, institutional, and political power of these movements, all towards reinforcing the hegemony of white supremacy and social control over the Black community. And this multi-layered strategy included several different things. The first, and really one of the most telling, was in the development of an ideological and cultural means and narrative to delegitimize the moral, social, and political need for Black social change and continue efforts against structural racism. A new lexicon and social narrative was developed with the proliferation of terms such as reverse racism and colorblindness, political correctness, the race card, and also focusing on focusing on cultural imagery such as the hyper criminal Black thug or the welfare queen or deadbeat dad in the media at large. And so again, this all sought to center Black pathology and victimhood as the source of Black social economic inequity as opposed to anti-Black racism, and also sought to shut down any conversation about the effects of anti-Black racism. And this also had an impact in broader dialogue and in broader coalitions. So even terms like people of color and multiracial that were advanced by progressives contributed to this growing political invisibility of the Black community because the distinctiveness of our own political selves and agendas got lost in this broader multiracial melting pot. So that was this ideological foundation has been permeated throughout, and it's really a critical element. Another part of this attack has been direct attacks on civil rights era policies, such as affirmative action, voting rights, challenging redistricting, and practices like subprime lending have been new elevations to go against some of the policies like the Fair Housing Act. We also have seen a reinforcement of social control over the Black community with new policies and programs like the War on Drugs, Stop and Frisk, mass incarceration, three strike laws. And then finally, there's been a destabilization and degrading of the institutional infrastructure of Black social change movements. Some of these were very public and intentional efforts to destabilize some civil rights and Black power movement organizations. And more recently, we've also seen efforts to target large Black membership social justice groups like ACORN for demise. But below the radar is a pattern of perhaps unconscious bias against funding Black-led social change organizations that we've also witnessed over the last 20 years. So as the social, institutional, political power of the Black community has decreased since the Civil Rights era, so too has its ability to make Black Lives Matter and Black communities thrive. And this is evidenced by the relative stagnation and or worsening of many of the social, economic, and political conditions of the Black community as compared to the late 1970s. So it's within this context of the decades-long degradation of the social, institutional, political power of the Black community that the ideal of the Black Social Change Funders Network was developed. And the current Black Lives Matter movement is so powerful because it's opening up this political space to be explicit about the need for specific work, policy, and resources dedicated to combat anti-Black racism and to create real opportunity for the Black community, and also help to awaken a new wave of hope for change. And so the Black Social Change Funders Network is riding on this wave of hope to help fill this political space within philanthropy. So now I'm going to turn to discussing the vision, the purpose, and the proposed bodies of work for the network. So the vision, overall vision for, or ambition for the Black Social Change Funders Network is for the Black community to build the social, institutional, and political power necessary to create a real opportunity for all Black people to thrive. And the purpose, as connected to that vision, is to mobilize philanthropic resources to reinvigorate and strengthen the infrastructure of Black institutional and political power to achieve substantive social and economic change for the Black community in the 21st century. And we seek to build and to help build an innovative, expansive, coordinated, lasting, and strong infrastructure for Black social change that addresses and maximizes the innovations and opportunities for the Black community in the 21st century. And we have a set of starting assumptions that is also helping to guide this work. First, there needs to be a reinvigorated and sustained social and political moral imperative for Black social change in this country. Second, it's critical to recapture the public discourse and legitimize the need for Black social change against anti-Black racism. Thirdly, there needs to be an explicit and unapologetic focus on social change for the Black community that relies on and prioritizes the development of Black-led social justice organizations and leaders. Fourthly, there needs to be a comprehensive and interconnected approach to Black social change that promotes policies, practice, and cultural change across the full spectrum of Black life. And this assumption is critically important, particularly to understand in this moment. And so while the issue of police violence has sparked this historic moment that we're currently in, the leaders of the movement for Black lives understand that police killings of Black people are perhaps the sharpest point of a very long blade that inflicts daily wounds on the collective body of the Black community. And this systemic state violence or death by 1,000 cuts spreads across all quarters of the Black community, including housing, education, criminal justice, healthcare, jobs, reproductive rights, economic security, and the environment. And so the focus of Black social change that we're moving forward right now cannot just be about policing and mass incarceration, but has to be about building the institutional political power to address any issue that limits the ability for the Black community to matter and thrive. Next assumption for us is that as the power of the Black community is strengthened, the prospects of progressive change for all communities have increased. And again, this is here for a number of different reasons. One being that we've heard from some racial justice program officers that they are getting some pushback lately when they've been trying to develop strategies specifically target Black social change in their portfolios because racial justice work is supposed to be explicitly multiracial. Our answer to that is, for one, most Black-led organizing and social change work is by strategy and by necessity multiracial. And moreover, we argue that a focus on strengthening Black institutional and political power has a dual effect of addressing the specific issues impacting the Black community and expanding the capacity for multiracial coalitions to address racial and social justice issues writ large. Again, building the power of the Black community, I think, helps to advance the process of progressive change overall. And then finally, our starting assumption is that philanthropy has an important role and responsibility in strengthening the capacity of Black social change organizations. And ultimately, what we are hoping to see and what we are striving to affect through this network is a substantial increase in the number of foundations that are developing integrated strategies and increasing their own grant making for achieving Black social change, with an emphasis on strengthening the infrastructure for Black-led institutional and political power. And so regardless of the particular issue focus of a foundation, we make the case that if you're about achieving social change, you need to have an explicit strategy, not just make a few grants focused on Black-led social change. Functionally, over time, the Black Social Change Funders Network can serve as a coordinated hub for philanthropic efforts on Black social change. And at this point, we envision the network organized into 3 overlapping bodies of work. So these overlapping bodies of work are learning, action, and networking and support. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about that. So firstly, around learning. What we mean by that is sharing information about key developments, opportunities, needs, and strategies towards building Black institutional and political power. A portion of this learning work will be similar to the learning activities of funder affinity groups, such as webinars, conferences, sessions, things like that. And we will develop our own learning sessions as well as inform our partners or network members about other learning opportunities related to Black social change. We will also share information about discrete funding needs, similar to the way that the Funders for Justice, which is an amazing funder affinity group that has come up in the last year, has kept its members informed about rapid response needs for Black Lives Matter related protests and activities. So sharing information is critical on this. But another aspect of this learning will be more action-oriented learning through doing deep learning and knowledge building about each other's work, about the work of the different participants of the network, and particularly around the opportunities for strengthening the infrastructure for Black institutional power. So this component of learning is absolutely essential and allows for network partners to effectively identify opportunities, coordinate our grant making to maximize the impact that we can have for advancing Black social change together. For instance, one of the first and ongoing activities that we want to do is to map the ecosystem of our collective grant making related to Black social change so that we can get a better understanding of who's doing what, who each of us is funding, where are the gaps and strengths, and what are the opportunities for us to coordinate or collaborate on grant making. Some of you sent over grant information related to your own Black social change grant making. I really appreciate those who sent that over. I know that's difficult to do and pull together. And we have that information and we place it on a map, and we'll add other data over time so that we can actually map not just the locale of the work, but also map to see where there are cross sections of issue, of strategy, of constituency, and other things. So finally, under learning, we imagine that there will be a research component to this learning work, that the network might sponsor our own research as well as facilitate and connect partners to other research opportunities. So case in point, Kevin Ryan from the New York Foundation has been doing a research project on Black social change organizations in the U.S. Over the last few years. And the network could be a place to learn more about and leverage support for this work. And there are other examples out there that I'm sure we're just not aware of right now. But again, the network can serve as this coordinating hub, this repository of this information so that we can actually share it in a more efficient fashion. So that's a kind of synopsis of some of the main points of our learning agenda. But the next area is around action. And we see one of the critical added values of the network is having a dedicated, strategic, and persistent philanthropic action to increase resources for strengthening the infrastructure of Black institutional and political power. And this action will take the form of both philanthropic advocacy to increase resources for Black-led social change and aligned grant making to maximize the strategic impact of our grant making to strengthen the infrastructure for Black institutional and political power. So I'm going to start with philanthropic advocacy first. So we have to make the case within philanthropy and also a broader public case about why it's important to fully support the infrastructure for Black institutional and political power. And so we will do this by engaging the sector as a whole through position papers, presentations. We'll develop a strategic communications plan to make sure that we have the right messaging and targeted messaging in order to, again, promote greater philanthropic investment within philanthropy. And the goal of this work overall is to substantially increase the number of foundations and the amount of resources in support of Black social change. And I would also add that one of the things I'm personally interested in seeing is more strategic development of more strategic actual agendas within the philanthropic community and within the strategic plans of foundations. So again, not just discrete grants, but actually an integrated strategy around supporting Black social change and helping to build Black-led institutional and political power. So I'm going to go up to talk about aligned grant making. And so in addition to influencing, advocating for more resources, the network also wants to have a direct role in helping to facilitate more strategic investments towards achieving Black social change by directly facilitating efforts to coordinate grant making, brokering relationships among funders, and perhaps hosting collaborative efforts and initiatives for Black social change. The primary point of alignment for us as a network is that this grant making seeks to strengthen Black institutional political power to achieve social change for the Black community. So all of our work and all the work we will promote through this network will be aligned with this multifaceted goal of strengthening Black institutional political power to achieve social change for the Black community. In terms of coordination, we mean exploring and facilitating opportunities for network partners to synchronize grant making for Black social change around an issue, locale, strategy, campaign, opportunity, et cetera. And I think at this point we have to figure out the best models for engaging in this type of coordinated grant making, but this will be an important aspect of the network's work moving forward, this coordinated grant making. And we see this coordinated grant making also is that we're talking about individual foundations coming together, not within a pooled fund, but looking at their own work and figuring out places of intersection where they can mobilize their current focus, their current grant making in partnership with other like-minded and similarly situated foundations. In terms of collaborative grant making, we've heard from some funders that they would be interested in contributing to a pool fund around Black social change, and this is something that we will definitely explore as we move forward, and something that as interest and support for growth, it definitely may be an important part of our work moving forward. But the core of what we're trying to do here and to say here is under action is the action is basically getting more resources out for supporting Black-led social change and building this infrastructure in the Black community for institutional political power. We want to hold ourselves accountable for making sure that more resources and hopefully more strategically deployed resources are going towards this work. Finally, we see the network as a place to offer networking opportunities and other support for program officers seeking to increase support for Black institutional political power in their foundations and beyond. And so although there's a great opportunity right now to be more explicit about focusing on Black-led social change, and I've had a number of different conversations with foundations, some of which I've never even interacted with before, who are thinking about, developing racial justice programs, thinking about focus on the Black community. There's a tremendous opportunity right now to be more explicit about focusing on Black-led social change, but it's still a heavy lift within philanthropy to do this. And moreover, we need to look long-term and make sure that this moment of interest in Black social change and anti-Black racism is not a passing fad, and also does not become too narrowly focused. And so this will require strategic support. And some of that support that we're hoping to mobilize through the network is peer support for individual program officers supporting Black-led social change work. Also, as a part of this network, and the core function of this network is to create a community of practice within philanthropy to share lessons and strategize around building support for Black-led social change. And also, finally, there's a possibility, as Susan mentioned earlier, through their work at AFPI around Black men and boys, they've been very strategic in supporting and providing technical assistance, other types of support to foundations who are interested in this area. There's a possibility for us developing a similar type of technical assistance regime and protocol and advice and support for foundations trying to integrate a focus on Black-led social change into their grant making. So I know that was a lot, and I've been talking for a very long time, but I hope that gives you a better understanding and grounding in our thinking to date about the vision, the purpose, and the bodies of work for the Black Social Change Funders Network. We're going to turn it over to Q&A right now, but I just want to reemphasize. The point that Susan made is that this is how far we've gotten today. Somebody needs to use their phone, but what we're really looking for is partnership. and developing this community of partners in practice towards advancing this. So look forward to your questions and look forward to engaging you more in the development of this network.
Thank you so much, Nat. And as Nat mentioned, we are open for Q&A at this time. If you have a question, you can raise your hand using the GoToWebinar control panel on your right, and we'll unmute your phone so that we can hear it. As you're preparing to do that, let me ask one quick question of you, Nat. We know that there are a lot of activities taking place. There are a lot of groups mobilizing. What sets this apart from some of the other groups, such as Funders for Justice and the like?
Sure, yeah, that's the question I've not only gotten a lot, but I've been in conversation with many of the leadership of groups like Funders for Justice, and there's a list up there right now. It's an incomplete list, but it's the Let Us Breathe Fund through the North Star Fund, which is a fund that was created in response to the extrajudicial killings of black people at the hands of police, has mobilized resources for black-led organizing and racial justice organizing and police accountability in New York, resource generation, black-led organizing for black liberation campaigns. I think raised, I may get the number wrong, but I think it's around $2 million that was directed from individual donors to black-led organizing groups around the country, and they've done an amazing job and service of actually developing a partial list of about 212 black-led liberation organizing groups around the country that's on their website. The Racial Justice Rapid Response Fund from Liberty Hill and other California-based partners, such as California Endowment and Rosenberg Foundation, has also raised a fund and distributed resources to support black-led organizing around police accountability. And as you mentioned, Funders for Justice was developed as a project of the Neighborhood Funders Group to provide this virtual organizing space around issues of racial justice and police accountability. And it's a really great network. We're part of the network that is providing learning opportunities and also sharing information around some of the organizing work that's been going on. And then there's also the development of the Movement for Black Lives Resource Strategy Table. And this is work that's being led forward by actually organizers and activists on the ground, primarily organized through the Movement Strategy Center in California. And what they're doing is developing a what they call a black print. And so they're looking specifically to talk about how philanthropy can best support the anchor organizations that are part of the Movement for Black Lives. So specific organizations that are right now a part of the network called the Movement for Black Lives. So all of that to say is that there's a lot of good work that's happening out there, and like I said, there's probably a lot more that's out there. The space that we see ourselves filling and occupying, both in relation and in complementarity with these groups, is that we see ourselves as both broader and it's sometimes narrower than some of these efforts. So broader because we are looking at issues across the spectrum of black life. So as I mentioned earlier, it's not just policing and criminal justice. We want to look at housing and education and employment and jobs and economic security and health care and voting rights. And so the full spectrum of black life, that's what we want to build the infrastructure, the black institutional and political infrastructure, in order to make sure that the black community has a kind of broad basis of an ability to thrive. And so some of the other initiatives, as I mentioned before, may be focused more directly, more specifically, or prioritize more policing and other issues like and other related issues. I also think that we might be narrower in some senses because of our specific emphasis on black-led social change. Again, while there's a lot of overlap and integration, generally speaking, around all these initiatives, I think we were all directly not just inspired, but to some degree brought to life by the dynamic organizing from the Black Lives Matter movement in the last year. But in some cases, the work is framed as racial justice work. And like I said, our particular focus is on Black-led social change, Black-led institutional and political power building. So I will leave that there, but I'll also say that I think that we can offer, the network can offer an opportunity to not just partner with these other formations, but also provide a space, a kind of broader space for sharing information, for learning, and strategic grant making all together. So we see ourselves as again, as this hub where several different aspects of work related to building Black institutional political power to achieve social change for Black community in the 21st century can come together.
Great, thanks for that, Nat. We have some questions that have come in, people having hands raised, as well as some folks that are typing questions that they'd like for Bianca to read. So Bianca, why don't we turn it over to those two different groups of questioners? Thank you.
No problem, Edward. I'm going to first invite Mr. Damon Hewitt to pose his question.
Thanks, Bianca, Edward, and Nat. Just kudos to you all, AFI leadership, and Hill-Snowden for what you all are doing. I think it's you know, the right work to be doing to leverage this opportunity in this moment where the nation's attention is captured on issues that matter to our communities. Want to also just note, I really like the notion of the spectrum of, I think of it as a spectrum of alignment of grant making, coordinated or collaborative or joint, because different things will be comfortable to different foundations. I'm wondering, Nat, whether you're thinking of this as primarily focused on aligning and coordinating existing commitments and investments, well, not commitments, but existing investments. So, for example, the foundation is already investing XYZ amount in a particular year. Is it more aligning it with others to make the impact more powerful? To what extent is it that, and to what extent is it new dollars? I think when I hear dollar, you haven't articulated dollar amounts, but I've heard other networks articulate dollar amounts that have gone to work, and I always get confused about what's really the differential impact. Is there actually more support happening than there was before? And that seems to be kind of a boogeyman in this kind of effort. We've seen that in the Executives Alliance for Boys and Men of Color as well, and we're trying to be as disciplined as possible with what we're doing. So I wonder if you can elaborate on that.
Right. So our thinking to date is that it's both and. So we're talking about, as I mentioned in the model, I'll go back to it, philanthropic advocacy to advocate for more philanthropic investment. So that's new dollars. But we also are talking about better coordination of existing dollars. So better strategic coordination of existing dollars. And because in addition to the different funds that I just mentioned a few minutes ago, I've heard of a number of different foundations, you know, doing individual grant making through their portfolios to different groups. What we're saying is that in order to really maximize the effectiveness and opportunity for achieving Black social change, which is across a complex of different issues, we need to be better within philanthropy about, one, knowing each other's work and looking for opportunities for partnership so that we can make the most of the resources that we have, and we can also look for other opportunities to expand on the work. So it's both and, but I also would say that we need to learn from, definitely, different models that are out there that are being developed, that have already been implemented, so that we can do this most effectively. So that's where the partnership comes in with folks who are coming into the network and sharing that information and sharing that knowledge and insight, and in some cases really technical knowledge as well.
Thank you for that, Nat. The next question is, can you share how the network will highlight and raise the visibility of all the diversity of Black lives, i.e. transgender, women, girls, men, and boys? And also, how will this effort include the issues that undocumented Black communities face in this country?
Right. Yeah. So that, I think that's of critical importance, and that's why we specifically talked about in the vision statement doing this to ensure that all of the Black community can thrive. Right. And I think that's one of the focus on all aspects of the Black community, all parts of the Black community in terms of constituencies. That's one of the most important, and I think the most revolutionary contributions of the leadership in the Black Lives Matter movement right now. Really, in a sense, modernizing the Black social change movement so that it is not just fully inclusive, but that the leadership of all of the aspects of the Black community is there. So I think through our strategic communications, we will continue, or we will push that forward. This value of or principle of supporting the ability for all of the Black community to thrive. And I think it's not necessarily just up to, quote, us, the network, or say AFSCME or Hill-Snowden to define this. It's really the partners that are part of the network that will also, I think, bring and can bring their different focus, their different interests, and their different priorities into the center to make sure that we are representing the full spectrum of Black life when we're talking about the need for Black lives to matter and the need for the Black community to thrive. So I hope I answered that. It's both. It's part of our core principle, and we are also the space is there for folks to bring a variety of different issues to the fore through this network.
The next question is from Mr. Bomani Johnson.
Hey, everybody, Nat and Susan and Edward and the gang, I'm really appreciative of this work and how it's developing moving forward. I did have a question. One is, it's kind of a clarity for me, but also are we also making sure that we're looking at all the opportunities as they present here? And it's about the question of the loss of institutional power. And the way I read it, or the way that I heard it, is that the traditional institutions that may have been operable in previous iterations of our ongoing movement are not as active in this, in that in many ways funders and others are having to find new ways to connect to this movement, especially given the lack of like traditional 501c3s and the decentralized leadership structures, etc. So are we looking at also how do we use even this fervor or this growing kind of fervor around racial equity as it's growing in philanthropy? Are we looking at ways to use that to really change the way that philanthropy interacts with the Black community overall, not just these pieces, but interacts with the Black community overall? Is that an opportunity? Am I looking too much into it? Or is that something that maybe we could begin to address this work as well?
Yes, I think that in order to get to a place where there's a consistent and strategic engagement of philanthropic resources directed toward supporting Black-led social change, that's going to require a transformation of just philanthropic status quo, right? Because that is not the way that philanthropy and foundations think about, look at, and deploy their investments right now, particularly as it relates to Black social change. And so, yes, what we're talking about is transforming not just the practice, but the culture of philanthropy in several different ways to allow for it to fully engage and it to be more of a partner in this process of affecting change within and for the Black community. I hope that answers the question.
And I would say, this is Susan. I mean, Bomani, just another take on your question. I think there has been, at least we have been busier than ever here at ABSI, responding to foundation requests for help around racial equity more broadly. So, you know, there are two things going on here. We're talking very specifically about the importance of investing in Black-led social change, and we've got a huge opportunity, I think, around the country where folks are inviting us in about racial equity more broadly. And we can use, I think, those opportunities to direct more funders to be thinking about the importance of Black self-preservation, Black-led social change as well. So we do see, again, an uptick, again, because everything that's going on in this country, the world has just changed, around racial equity more broadly. We can use those opportunities to narrow about the importance of this issue specifically, I think.
Thank you, Nat and Susan. The next question is from Leon Caldwell.
Hello, everyone. This is Leon. Thanks, Nat and Susan and everyone for your leadership on this really, really important topic. I'm curious about some early thinkings, and I just want to be mindful that this is really our first, hearing of this, and I know it's some beginning thoughts, and the concept being introduced is really powerful. This is almost like a follow-up to the last question, but an extension of it is, much of this stuff, as Nat, in your presentation you alluded to, there's going to need to be a ramp-up or preparation of the existing kind of talent in philanthropy now. What's the early thinking about how do we arm program officers, senior leaders to convey this importance or this initiative to not only the boards but the management levels right above them? Is there some early thinking about producing talking points, sharing these slides, or some other strategic way to bring people on board who in our institutions and organizations will ultimately, pull the lever to say yay or to, try to sabotage this in some other way? Not to be, destructive, but also to think about practically how do we get more people on board and, help us sell this to organizations that may be on the fence.
Right. So that's a great question, and what we've talked about thus far is the absolutely critical need to upfront develop a very strong strategic communication platform and campaign and infrastructure within the network in order to advance the things we talked about today, and actually to have an impact and towards transforming philanthropy the way we've talked about. And so that's going to require, like I said, from upfront developing strategic communications, and not just within philanthropy. I mean, I think that's the other piece of this too, is that as I mentioned before, the kind of possibly or perhaps unconscious bias towards supporting Black-led organizations that at least several of us have seen within philanthropy is not just a product of philanthropy, it's a product of the broader social milieu that we're working in, and the backlash and all the other aspects I talked about earlier in the conversation. So there has to be strategic messaging that's targeted at philanthropy, but that's applicable much broadly to influence the public discourse, and that has to be a very central, a very thoughtful, and a very strategic component of this work.
And this is Susan. I think just to jump on that, Nat, this is where I think the power of the network and the partnerships, the other existing colleagues really come into play. Nat talked about strategic communications. We know we've got to do some work around case making, but using the networks of ABSI and NFG, Funders for Justice, around real intentional professional development, we've done that here, and we know sort of that it takes intentional sort of professional development over time to get folks comfortable just around framing race. We've been doing it mostly around framing issues as it relates to investing in Black communities. But, and then long term, Nat mentioned the possibility, this is way down the road, a possibility of technical assistance or consulting. I think there are a set of tools, very early sort of steps, little steps that we can take, just as you say, talking points, sharing slides, really bringing in strategic communications expertise to help us even do those early steps, but then the use of our professional development sort of opportunities across ABSI, partners like NFG, all the way to consulting and TA. I think there's a broad range of tools that we could rely on here.
Right. And the last thing I'll say is that the peer support, what we talked about as part of the networking and creating this community of practice, will both contribute to reducing the kind of sense of isolation that program officers may feel, so creating a space where they actually can come and talk about these issues and hopefully strategize, and even informally strategize to move forward agendas within their own institutions and get types of support for that. Younger?
Yes, the next question is from Allison Brown.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this presentation, Nat, and for the partnership, ABSI. You mentioned earlier in the call, Susan, that ABSI and Hill-Snowden will be looking for volunteers and partners to help move the initiative forward, and I'm just wondering exactly what you're looking for in volunteers and what you're asking of them.
Sure. Jumping ahead, thanks, Allison. We're really looking for a couple of folks to help us do a couple of things. One is to plan the next 2 to 3 meetings based on today's conversation. So we want to sort of distill the conversation, the discussion, the ideas that we hear today. And then we're going to ask a few people just to sit with us in mid-January to really think about the next 2 to 3 meetings of this network. Also to help us sort of hone in on some starting activities. Nat talked about the mapping that's already underway, but we also wanted to get some co-think on starting activities outside of the mapping, and then also just to talk about proposed structure of the network. So the idea, Allison, is to bring folks together in mid-January, and the role at this point for the committee, help us think about the new 2 to 3 next meetings, help us think through starting activities, and help us think about proposed structure. If we can do that in one really good, or perhaps no more than 2 conference calls in mid-January, that's the ask at this time.
Right. And it may be more than 2 or 3. Maybe it's 4 or 5. But
Okay, next question is, there's greater discussion about mobilizing Black wealth to address our issues. How might we engage high net worth donors to supporting this work?
Susan, you want to take that?
Yeah, I just want to say that we're sort of already on that, and doing it in a very specific way through other programming at ABSI. And this is where sort of this work overlaps with other strategies here in the organization. Some of you know that we've been working really hard to ensure that Black investment management firms have the opportunity to manage foundation endowments. And one of the reasons why we are pushing hard on this, one, because it's just an extension of our equity and diversity agenda. We want to ensure that Black people get a chance to lead in this field. But we're also, pushing foundations that building Black businesses, hiring Black businesses is actually aligned with the mission of most philanthropies, building wealth in Black communities, addressing income and wealth disparities and the like. But the third reason why we're doing this work with Black investment firms is because they are very philanthropic. These are high net wealth folks, and we've actually started a few conversations with a number of Black investment firms about this work, and trying to now sort of organize who's interested just within that sort of category of Black donors. So that is to say, it's the conversations have already started. We've started to think through this at AbbVie, and we're sort of embedding it in our investment manager work, trying to get more attention of those donors who happen to be Black investment managers on the issue of Black-led social change. The other thing I would say, though, is that we have now a Black donor sort of strategy and body of work at AbbVie. Some of it is, I guess, most visible at our annual conference, where we actually now have a Black donor salon. Some of you have been part of these, where we bring Black philanthropists into a conversation about the most strategic use of our investments. And we can make this a very focused sort of priority within our Black philanthropy work more broadly. Again, that's about organizing meetings with Black donors, talking about where we might put this, what are some of the most strategic sort of places for their own philanthropy. So we've got some early ideas, but interested in other thoughts that folks have about how to do just this. Yeah.
Next question is there data available that provides a picture of the actual number, type, and scale of activities of these Black organizations doing this work?
So let me answer that two ways. One is that we need to have much more research and research specifically on that, looking at capacity, looking at who's doing what, and looking to see a broader range of questions around what the infrastructure for Black institutional political power currently looks like, so that we can start being in a better position to chart what we need to do in terms of mobilizing our resources to see what it should and could look like going forward. I mentioned earlier that Kevin Ryan has been doing a research project over the last several years to initially was focused on Black-led organizing, and then expanded into looking at Black social change, Black community building organizations across the country. I think Kevin may be on this call, but he has collected through his analysis, through his outreach, I think about, I don't know, the neighborhood of about 1,500, 1,300 different groups and or projects. Some are volunteer, a lot of them are NAACP local chapters, but it's part of the broader infrastructure that we're talking about of folks in the Black community engaged in social change. Most recently, he has circulated an in-depth survey to Black social change organizations that are specifically drilling down on issues of capacity, issues of fundraising, what types of constituencies they serve, and a range of other issues that talks about their current, that in the aggregate will give, I think, a good picture of the infrastructure. But I will say this, that he's been doing this a number of years, and part of the reason why it's taken so long is because the support, he hasn't been able to develop support for it. And I think this is just like, to your question, this is a really critical component of our understanding and knowledge and ability to track a better way forward, is to understand what the current infrastructure is. And so because that's so important, it needs to be supported and funded at a commensurate level. So I definitely encourage anybody on this phone that on the webinar right now who's interested in looking at this particular body of work to get in touch with Kevin. He's at the New York Foundation, and I think it's definitely worthy of a good deal of support.
Thank you both. The next question from Terrence Pitts.
Everybody, just want to thank the leadership at AFI and Hill-Snowden for organizing the call. I think this is a great conversation. So I have a couple of questions, and I'll just shoot them off, and whatever you can answer in a lot of time, fine. If not, I can follow up with you all individually. But I think my biggest question is more around strategy. You know, I think different people can define Black-led social change and institutional change in different ways. And so I'm wondering how are we defining that collectively, and who's defining that? So for example, coming out of the convening this summer in Cleveland for the Movement for Black Lives, from the different strategy sessions, there were several, you know, big picture ideas that came from those strategy session tables around what those activists and advocates wanted, but how universal is that? And so that's one question. And then two, are there specific, so who is defining this Black-led social change and what that means and what that looks like? And then two, are there examples out there right now of best practices for models for Black-led social change? We know Black Lives Matter, of course, but actual kind of policy change on the ground in cities, which is, I'm assuming, the kind of institutional change and systemic change we want to see. Like, where are the best practices for those now? You know, do we have an idea of what we're shooting for? So that's just kind of a part two. And then more on the kind of nuts and bolts. Are you all talking about pooled funding in addition to coordinated funding? And if so, how would the pooled funding work, and is there a mechanism for that? And then the third question is, when will the mapping of the funding be available to other funders? Because I'd be really interested to see that. Yeah, so those are my questions. Thank you.
Let's see, I know I got 1 in 3. All right, so in terms of, it's best practices. So in terms of who defines what Black-led organizing, what the infrastructure looks like. So what we've done thus far is to present a frame and agitate for some engagement, right? We presented this frame of saying we need to develop a body, the Black Social Change Funders Network, to focus specifically on the reinvigoration of the infrastructure for Black institutional and political power, right? We are not at this point saying that we are defining, you know, what that means and the full scope of what that looks like to mean, and that's one of the fundamental reasons why we need to, as Susan said earlier, need to have a network and what the value of the network is. It's in having an iterative dialogue and discussion and sharing that would help to fill those definitions out of what that is. And like I said, there are different folks who are engaging in this. The Movement for Black Lives Research Strategy table said, you know, they are in direct dialogue with folks on the ground and assessing what the needs are and moving that up. And that's in for a particular body of organizations facing, to some degree, you know, particular issues. But over time, you know, what I would personally like to see is a structure where it's not just philanthropy, it's not just us having this conversation about, you know, what this kind of strategic deployment for resources for Black social changes. That really has to be, from my perspective, directly informed by, you know, if not led by, you know, folks on the ground. And how we figure out how to do that is I think, going to be, you know, a really important challenge for us, but it's one that I think is important to engage. So it's an authentic, authentic and an organic process of coming together as political actors, you know, towards achieving these goals that we have. Susan, did you? I don't know if you wanted to.
Yeah, just that. I mean, I think generally the framing's got to come from the network. You know, when we talk about this is about aligned grant making, some of what we've got to do is come to some agreement about the it. And so we've put some, you know, content out there. I think this is right to begin to just ensure that we're checking in with other groups and other tables and frames and definitions they're using. But I think it's a responsibility of the network to agree on a frame and move forward.
Right. The second question, I'm just going to run through these hopefully a little quicker because there's a few more questions in the Q&A in a few. But the second question about best practices, I mean, you know, before the Hill-Snowden Foundation launched our Making Black Lives Matter initiative focusing specifically on Black-led organizing, within our youth organizing work and within our economic justice work, we were already supporting Black-led organizing groups that were having significant impact in local communities, on city-level policy, and in other institutional settings. And so there are good examples that are out there. Often they are below the radar. Often they are achieving success under tremendously constricted resources in terms of capacity, but they're achieving success. And so what we're saying is that, you know, and I will say this too, that this also dovetails with some of the other work that we're doing in Hill-Snowden in terms of supporting work in the South. That it's a similar situation where there are persistent issues, largely many of them are focused on issues of racial injustice, and there are constricted resources for doing that work. And so I think that there are a lot of opportunities for existing work to support that and get it to a place where it's actually fully supported. There are a lot of opportunities, as we said in our vision statement, for trying to figure out what a 21st century Black social change infrastructure looks like. And so that will be not just new organizations, but also new ways of doing work. And that's things that, so the best practices I think are in development on those pieces, but are still yet to be seen. And then finally, on the mapping, so I think about 7 different foundations did the homework assignment and turned in their Black social change grant making, and thank you for all of you who did that. I've taken, I don't have it to put up right now to try and do that maybe during the next steps part, but we've mapped that and we've looked at those investments. But some of it was a mix of national organization foundations, but also several local foundations. So there wasn't necessarily a whole bunch of overlap. But from that cohort right there were about 90 different grants that were done over the last 2 years. Some extended back further than that. And then more recently, as part of our Making Black Lives Matter initiative, we sent out a survey to the broader community, and we're looking for organizations that fit our guidelines and criteria for Black-led organizing. And we sent out a survey. We got back 259 completed surveys representing 259 separate organizations and or projects, the majority of which I've never heard of before, right? And some of them that were really, that I had. And that 259, I also have a database for the Resource Generations Black-led Organizing Group, which our campaign is 212. When I overlapped the two, there were only 67 groups that overlapped. So we're talking about 370 discrete Black-led social change organizations, as they define themselves, that are out there. So, and that's just from the survey we did was over the course of 3 weeks. And so my point is that we are doing this mapping as a part of this process. Hill-Snowden is developing as a part of our initiative a searchable database, a mapping searchable database. We hope to have that up and running within the first quarter of next year. But as the network, I think that can also be an ongoing thing that we do, primarily based on mapping the investments that we're currently making. And once we map those investments, we'll also be able to look across, hopefully around, so that we can look at subgroupings around strategy, around issue, around place and locale, so we can be more strategic about where opportunities might be for us to come together and do some coordinated grant making. And the collaborative piece, like pool fund, again, we've been in conversations around that. Some people have said they want to see us do that. We still need to figure out what's the best process and infrastructure for that right now.
You know, just one addition to the point about best practices, and Terrence, your question. So we do know they're out there. As Nat said, they're under the radar. This is going to be a really important part of the work because we have to show the field that is doable, that is a good investment. And we know philanthropy just doesn't make investments because there's evidence that suggests that it's good, but particularly as it relates to sort of encouraging folks to invest in Black people and Black communities, we have to show that this is doable, that this is an investment that leads to wins. So I think that's got to be an early part of our work, is demonstrating that there are best practices out there.
Thank you both. The next question is from Leslie Gross-Davis.
Hi, I had a question about C4 work and whether currently do you envision a C4 working group, or will there be focus on that? Because one of the gaps that I'm seeing is a connection to the next generation of Black political leadership and funding from philanthropy that goes to something other than GOTV efforts. So I was wondering if that's going to be part of this, and I'd be interested in helping out.
Well, Leslie, if you're interested in helping out, then that could be a part of this. basically the answer. No, I think that's critically important. Yeah, I mean, we have to look at a broader spectrum of voter engagement and develop an accountable governance system. And you know, if it was just you know, specific campaigns to change particular policies, that's not a long-term strategy toward political transformation. You know, those are campaigns. So yeah, it has to be a part of this in my mind. But we need members of the network or other folks to help inform, guide, and move that forward. So again, we're looking at this network as a place for all of those ideals to, if not, you know, find some common footing, to find a home, or at least to find inspiration, and to, you know, go forward and do as you will. But we need the full spectrum in order to really create the sustainable and meaningful opportunities for Black communities to thrive.
Agreed. This is Edward, and I'll just mention the timeliness of that. Just this week alone, some of us in the AFTI team have had meetings with folks that are considering Black political action committees as well as Black leadership training in the political space, most notably in Mississippi. So it's very timely, and we definitely want to continue and to hear more about what you all know regarding other groups that may be in your networks.
Right. Actually, I'll just say really quickly, one of the first meetings that I had, and one of the first, I don't know if you want to call them official members, was the Black Civic Engagement Fund, Sienna Lewis. I met with her, and so again, their infrastructure out there. There are folks doing work, you know, around this that I think is really dynamic, and we need to find a space to bring those ideals, bring that work together, so that folks can see it and then see what the opportunities are out of it.
That was all the questions I had, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay. Thank you, Bianca.
Okay. I think we're pretty much right on time then. We wanted to move into some next steps and some closing comments. And one is to actually revisit the question that Allison asked a little earlier. And as I mentioned at the start of the call, we actually do want to see if there are a few of you who might work more closely with Nat and myself and Edward here at ABFE to do a couple of things, really to plan the next 2 to 3 meetings of this network, to help think through some starting activities. We have a number of questions on the table now that we just want to have a broader group of people thinking through, and to talk a little bit about proposed structure. So as I mentioned, this group will meet in mid-January. I mentioned a number of meetings, and Matt mentioned a number. We'll split the difference, and we'll come to some agreement about how frequently this committee, this design committee will meet. But just want to open it up and see if there are those of you on the phone who are interested in taking some next steps with us.
And I'll add, right. Okay. I mean, I'll add if you're shy, or if you know, you need to. There's been a lot we've been talking about today, and I'm sure a lot of it has to sink in. So you know, we're here. We'll put up our information to get in touch with us on the next slide. So if someone, as a couple people have mentioned so far, you know, are interested in looking to engage, that's great. But we're definitely going to be here. This is something that we're committed to. So you know, you let us know as you figure it out.
And I'll also add that there are 3 handouts that you will find on the right column that give some more overview. And once this webinar concludes, we'll also have it available, the recording, and we'll make it available and send it out to you all, and invite you to then also respond via the email that we sent. So there will be some other ways for us to stay in touch and continue the conversation.
So with that, we are planning, in addition to Edward's comments, we do expect to bring a full network group together again back in early February 2016. So while we'll get a small group of colleagues to work with us in January, we anticipate a next meeting happening in early February 2016. And as Edward said, there are a couple ways to stay connected. We'll get these notes out. The highlights of this conversation. Hill-Snowden, Nat is working on that mapping, and Nat, I believe you said maybe an early sort of look at the emerging map in the new year, after the new year, clearly. Mm-hmm. And the other thing we were thinking about, if there is an interest in a listserv and continuing the conversation in that way, just let us know. And we can figure out, again, from the network, from the group of colleagues who are interested in this issue and this conversation, how we might take some leadership to make that happen. So with that, I think we are coming up to the close of this meeting. Appreciate your time and your attention from our side at ABFE. Nat, I'll give you the last word, but just wishing everybody a happy holidays, stay safe, and be well.
Yep. Definitely wishing everybody happy holidays, and thank you again so much for your interest. We are really excited by the prospect of developing out what we think is an extremely important and timely and hopefully powerful network and intervention within the philanthropic space. And we really just want to take a moment now and going forward to celebrate and to also recognize the amazing work and the courageous work that has really fueled this moment within the last year, but also place that within the context of the scores of people who are out on the ground every day for years and years and years and years. Mm-hmm. That have been struggling to achieve this broader vision of freedom, of justice, of equity, of really having an opportunity to thrive within the Black community. So this is one element of a much broader continuum of struggle that is necessary. And, you know, we're trying to do our part within philanthropy, and we look forward to the opportunity to do that with you. All right. So I think with that, we may be ending, and definitely looking forward to working with y'all in the new year. Please, if you want information, you can get in touch with any of us. Actually, hold on, I was going to put this up. There we go. Oh, sorry, missed it. I'll put up our information for you to contact us, and I'm really looking forward to being in continued dialogue with you. Thank you. Have a great day.